Welcome to the first panel of the afternoon session. And we have quite a few presenters in this session. And our first speaker is Marwan Crady. And Marwan is coming from University of Pennsylvania, and he's also at the American University of Beirut. And the title of his speech is Neo-Ottoman Cool, Turkish Foreign Policy and Popular Culture in Arab Public Discourse. So please, Marwan.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand. For mechanical problems with my back, I'd rather stand. But do I need to speak? Are you recording? I'm very loud. Do I need the microphone? Okay, if you tell me if you can't hear me. My students often complain that I'm too loud. This is a project that's been going on for a couple of years now. And it's basically an attempt to understand a lot of the preoccupation and the fascination with Turkish media and Turkish popular culture in the Arab world over the last couple of years. And what I'm going to do today is so there's an original draft of the paper that's too long to present in its entirety. Basically, looking at the history of Arab-Turkish relations, looking at how, for instance, there are quite a few studies on how Turks and Arabs have represented each other in textbooks, believe it or not. Quite interesting, in-depth studies, and the representations are not very flattering. Of course, Arabs and Turks have 400 years of imperial relations where the Ottomans ruled the Arab world, and the question that preoccupies many critics is how can a few soap operas and a couple of television channels overwhelm and neutralize the impact of 400 years of bad relations. So this is the issue I'm gonna try to explain to you. What we've done is, because this is a project with a PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania, is we've gathered about 120 articles from the Arab press, pre-Arab Spring. So this is all data, and I'm going to talk in my conclusion a little bit about what might have changed. Looking at how they've looked at the new Turkish role, at Turkish assertiveness, at the new active and at the same time friendly foreign policy. And then I moved to the notion of neo-Ottomanism, that perhaps there are people who have far more expertise on this in the audience today. But this is a very important issue because a lot of the debate in Arab public discourse about Turkey is, what does neo-Ottomanism mean? If it means what a new form of Ottomanism we can do without it. If it means a new model that perhaps some of us would follow, then we can do with it. One Arab columnist called Turkey, quote-unquote, a seductive package. A quote, European, Islamic, secular, capitalist Turkey. Now, it would probably be not surprising to you that this is a soft Islamist who's affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood in the Muslim Brotherhood chapter in Lebanon. But the bottom line is that Turkey is nowadays a fascinating subject in the Arab world. The coming of the Arab uprisings and the Turkish role, which, like the Saudi role or the US role, was not very consistent, has made the issue a lot more complex, has fueled some of the people who were saying, wait a second, you just forgot about all our history and said, Turkey is the best thing that can happen to the Arab world. So what I'll do today is a couple of things. Now that I've given you some background, there's three main issues we focus on initially in the paper. One of them is the Arabic channel at Turkey, TRT7, which we talked about in depth. TRT7 is not very old. It's available at the hotel here. I was watching it for a while last night. TRT7 does a couple of things, I think. It's an Arabic language channel. It's available for free for anyone in the Arab world who has access to either a satellite package or a satellite dish. In most cases, these can be pirated, or you can pay a minimal fee for a big package and get it. But I think TRT7, which, like any other channels like BBC Arabic or the US government's Al Hurra or France 24 or all these channels, or Russia Today, the Russian channel in Arabic, I don't think we should delude ourselves in thinking these could have any actual effective strategic communication dividends. But rather, they do two things. Number one, they are available for a time of crisis where Turkey could be involved in. People who watch these channels know that this is a channel they can go to get the Arabic, in the Arabic language, the Turkish government's perspective. But I think the more important reason for its existence is it's a badge of great power status. Nowadays, if you have an Arabic language satellite TV channel directed to the Arab world, you're saying, I'm part of the club of the great powers who have the need, the capacity, and the status to address 300 million Arabs in one of the world's most politically, religiously important regions that's also one of its most volatile. So this is Geographies-Session. I won't say more about it. The second one is the value of the world's film and television series. The famous Murat Alemdar, the Turkish Rambo, like one columnist called him, who basically, what this does, it inverts the Hollywood narrative where whenever there's an action movie, you will not lose a lot of money if you bet that the bad guy is going to be Arab or Muslim or preferably both. And so what the value of the wolves does, it reverses this narrative and has this Turkish commando who goes and fights in the name of the Middle East, in the name of Arabs, in the name of Muslims, in the name of Turks, basically in the name of everybody who's the bad guy or the stupid guy in Hollywood movies. And there's one scene that's very revealing. I think it's in the third season, in the second season of the series, where Murat Alemdar is doing a very covert operation in Israel. He's captured by the Israelis, and he's asked, what are you doing here in Israel? And there's a very dramatic answer, I'm not in Israel, I'm in occupied Palestine. And this tells it all. So there's a big discussion of this series and film in the Arab world. But again, I'm not interested in going more detail into this. What I am interested in discussing in somewhat more detail is the series Gümüş, Nur in Arabic, which has created a lot of fascination, but also debates about why is this popular. It created a lot of panic, especially in the Gulf countries, with a lot of stories and anecdotes about women abandoning work and family and husbands to watch the series because allegedly of the beauty of its male protagonist. And so we're trying to go beyond these kinds of discourses about, it's not the first time that we get these moral panics in the Arab world, so why is this very special? So in the interest of time, I'm going to read a little bit and then move on to the so what and the conclusion. So on July 20th, 2008 edition of Al-Quds Al-Arabi, which is a London-based pan-Arab daily newspaper with an Arabist editorial line that's often critical of the West, of US and Israeli policies, that's supportive of Palestinian rights, all that. It featured an interesting cartoon. The title was Diseases of the Era, that included 3 side-by-side vignettes. The first vignette from the left featured today's looking black and white cow, her front leg up, her pupils dilated, her tongue out of her mouth, and saliva splashing out, with the caption underneath said, mad cow disease. In the middle vignette stood a miserable-looking yellow bird, looking as dazed as the cow, with stars around his head and heavy and red eyelids, a tissue held in one wing and a runny nose with the caption, bird influenza. The third vignette to the left of the cartoon featured a dapper man with hazel-colored hair and a well-trimmed beard, and a tuxedo and bow tie. The caption underneath the third vignette said, the Nur television serial, that's Gümüş, with an exclamation mark for emphasis. So by placing the Turkish television serial Nur Gümüş, which was leading television ratings in many Arab countries, especially in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, as a craze, on par with 2 diseases that were in the news, the cartoonist hinted at the viral, contagious, and perhaps pathological nature of the Arab craze for Turkish television drama, especially Gümüş. And its chief male protagonist, depicted in the cartoon above, Muhammad, who's half a couple with the female character Nur. Gümüş has all the trappings of the usual soap opera. You can see that in Latin American telenovelas. It's the woman who comes from a relatively poor background, who marries a wealthy, cosmopolitan, urban guy from a big, important family. And there's an intrigue of treason, of illegitimate children, of sexual relations, of all kinds. It's the usual telenovela recipe. In that sense, it's nothing new. But Arab media coverage of Muhammad, a handsome man and an ideal husband, he's sensitive, he's thoughtful, he's supportive, he's romantic, established him as an icon, we argue in the project, of an accessible modernity. If the trope of neo-Ottomanism was conjured up by Arab pundits concerned about the return of regional Turkish influence, hence the Ottoman, but in a different guise, i.e. it was economic as opposed to actual imperial occupation, hence the neo. Then coverage of Muhammad, we argue, established him as the quintessential cool neo-Ottoman. He's representative of the stroke that we're calling neo-Ottoman cool. He's a more alluring, stylish, glamorous, and telegenic version of the Turkish foreign minister, or even of Prime Minister Erdogan himself. So, you know, what is this? Why did this craze happen, and how did it happen? The craze over Turkish television drama peaked in 2008 when Noor was shown on the commercial channel NBC, which is Saudi-owned and based in Dubai. The producer at NBC who convinced the owners to actually purchase Gümüş was faced with resistance at the beginning, and when he bought it and it was so successful, he literally became a millionaire. He can finance $1 million projects of his own money now because he made that decision, but that's money. And so, you know, so this is a significant moment in Arab television, precisely because it comes on the heel of a period of very strong success for Syrian television drama, which was really mounting a challenge, at least in parts of the Arab world, to the long-term historical dominance of Egyptian television drama. And it also comes on the heel of a chapter in the 90s where Mexican, especially Mexican, but also Brazilian and Venezuelan telenovelas were dubbed in Arabic and came to the Arab world. And one of the arguments that I've made before is that what Latin American telenovelas and other shows, other genres share is this, first of all, what I call the global South aesthetic. It's an aesthetic that is modern but not Western, and I can go into detail about what that means. And that's one of the main reasons behind the success of Gümüş. So the series told the story of a young and rich loving couple in Istanbul. It was dubbed into the Syrian Arabic spoken dialect with Syrian actors and television stars. So when people are watching Gümüş, from the voices, they know who are the dubbers, who are already famous people, and that's also significant. It was the first and to date most successful Turkish series dubbed in Arabic on a pan-Arab scale. There have been many since then. I can give you the names, but I don't have the Turkish names, so it probably doesn't say much. In 2010, for instance, there was one called Forbidden Love that was very interested. All these series carry common themes about the Istanbul elite. People who are rich, people who can go and fly somewhere to Europe or North America just in a half hour after deciding, you know, those kinds that you see in some American soap operas. Love, sex, marriage, family, money, violence, social class, organized crime, connection between wealth and organized crime, all these issues. But there were also some political themes to many of these series. Chiefly the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, as I've mentioned. One of the interesting things about these series is that the political themed series are successful. People comment on them, columnists write their columns. Every once in a while there's a talk show in Arabic that discusses them, but they all pale in comparison to what Gümüş did. And Gümüş did not have political themes. It was about this wealthy Istanbul family. The patriarch supposedly has some links in his past to organized crime. His grandson, who's Muhammad, wants to marry Noor. He's faced by opposition from his mother at the beginning, then she supports it. It's a soap opera without really any political backdrop. According to the in-house viewer ratings at NBC, for instance, 80 million viewers watched the last episode, which is a very significant audience. 80 million viewers, probably more than half of the people tuned into television in the Arab world on any given night, or maybe a little less than that, but it's very significant. The Arab press has been awash with reports about the popularity. You know, the actor is Kıvanç Tatlıtuğ. I'm probably butchering his name, but I think you know who I'm talking about. According to several reports, for instance, there were reports that led to talk shows. One in Saudi Arabia, one in the Sudan that I know about for a fact. About is Gümüş leading to an increase in divorce rates? I mean, this was actually discussed for an hour, and for an hour and a half on the other show. And of course, there are people who believe that yes, because you know you have this kind of Middle Eastern but Western-looking man who's, as I said, who's helpful, who's romantic, who's also masculine, who's seductive, who knows what his wife likes, who tries to keep her happy. And supposedly, there wasn't a single Arab man who did that, so that's why the series was successful. Reports focused on the popularity of merchandise from Gümüş. As one article said, from the souks of Tunis to the markets of occupied East Jerusalem, T-shirts bearing pictures of the glamorous Muhammad and his lovely wife Noor are selling like hotcakes. Now, of course, I bought one of these T-shirts, and I like to think of them like the T-shirt that I sold on Tahrir Square of the Revolution. That you buy a T-shirt very cheaply, you wear it once, and then you wash it, and it just shrinks completely. It's very much like the hopes, the dance hopes of the uprisings and of modernity in the Arab world. There were stories about street vendors, for instance, in Damascus, saying that one of the guys who sold sweets, another one sold small pieces of Damascene mosaics, who said they threw all that away and they just went and got pictures from Gümüş, and they were selling the pictures and making a lot more money. The usual kind of proverbial empty streets when Gümüş is showing, women demanding freedom from their husbands after watching an episode, getting inspired by Noor and all that. There was also something else that was important in 2009. There was a 21% rise in the number of tourists, for instance, from the United Arab Emirates to Turkey. 50% of increase in Moroccan tourism to Turkey. And according to some figures, 70% increase in Saudi tourism to Turkey. As many of you who go to Istanbul, I was in Istanbul for a couple of weeks in the summer, and there are neighborhoods where the presence of Gulf tourists is very, very visible. So it's definitely, Turkey is now a destination. Now the problem in most of the commentary is that this was argued to be a consequence of the popularity of Noor, as opposed to something else, which I'll get back to. We have the Turkish government had some ads, and the Arab world announced that it would give prizes and financial awards to support producers and directors to create media products that help Turkey's image in the Arab world. This is documented. And there were even some people in the Arab world who participated in, for instance, writing screenplays, who, funnily enough, would be translated into Turkish, supposedly to be shot in Turkey, then to be dubbed in Arabic. So it's a very interesting story. We also have many Turkish television stars that appeared in Arabic music videos. And the similarities between Arab and Turkish music videos are fascinating. They'll be for a different presentation, but they're very, very similar, at least aesthetically. Now, there was criticism of these Turkish television series. A lot of people said that this is superficial, like any fad that will go away. But the consensus, the broad majority of people were asking, why are these so popular? What is it that Turkish cultural production is doing right, that Arab cultural production is doing wrong, that make us, that give them this edge? Well, one of the matters of consensus was the style and screen appearance gave Turkish television drama a competitive edge. So generally they have, how am I doing with time? 5 minutes. So generally there's high production values, all that stuff, but no local relevance. And this is what some critics went back and said, look, we can compare, for instance, Gümüş to Balakay, which is one of the most popular Syrian dramas about a neighborhood in Damascus a long time ago. It's set in the early 20th century. And people said the problem with a lot of the Arab drama is that nostalgic about the past that no longer exists, while Turkish drama is showing people living lives now, today, and tomorrow. So that was one of the things. So, I mean, to me, the most important issue here to discuss, as I've mentioned before, is that, number one, this is not unique. So, the first time I wrote about this phenomenon, I was finishing up a book I was writing about reality television and the craze about reality television in the Arab world, which I interpreted as a debate over modernity, over what to accept from a modernity that has been largely defined by the West, and what not to accept. And in the conclusion, I was watching Gümüş, and I said, look, this is one example, for instance, in how you can offer something to a public that it takes up as something that's accessible. Why? It's accessible because it's acceptable and it has element of cultural proximity. And I know Yeşim is going to talk more about cultural proximity. And this is why, the notion of the accessible modern. Now, the problem with all of this, of course, is what does it have to do with the theme, the transnational cultural flows? I think it's the bottom line, the most important thing about this. It is something that I've been preoccupied with and wrote about theoretically, which is what I'm calling flows, south-to-south flows. Typically, when you look at a lot of the literature until very recently in media studies, in international communication, what we now call global media studies, somehow the preoccupation and the debate always focuses on media products that originate in the West and are received or consumed or debated or rejected in the West. This is a case, I think, quite a fascinating case of not only south to south, not only Brazilian telenovelas being watched in Thailand, but Turkish drama being watched in the Arab world, in terms of where both the context of production and the context of reception, to use these relatively simplistic terms, have a long history together. And I think this is where this is significant, and this is where it can help us understand and theorize what is meant by modernity in different places. And of course, the transnational is very important part of it, because one of the fundamental way in which modernity is elaborated is through a process of othering, through a process of saying not only who we are, but who we are not, right? And these kinds of proximate, different yet similar, dissonant yet resonant types of cultural product lead to these kinds of debates that are not as easily completed as saying, oh, this is Western, we can dismiss it, or this is authentic. The politics of authenticity, for instance, are complicated tremendously by Yunus. Because a lot of Arabs say, I haven't done any field work about the specific show, but I've seen some, and I've seen some journalistic account saying, this is different enough that it's attractive, but this is similar enough that it's accessible. And I think this is the rub in terms of understanding how modernity is elaborated transnationally. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this lively presentation. Our next presenters are Zafer Yörük and Pantelis Vatikiotis from the host university and Faculty of Communications here. And their paper is entitled Soft Power or Illusion of Hegemony, the Case of the Turkish Soap Opera Colonialism.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Our project draws, as the title indicates, on the regional popularity of the Turkish soap operas, specifically on the Middle East and Greece, assessing actually the utility of the concept of the soft power that research reports and mass media actually use. So let's start first with the idea of the soft power, which is much related to globalization process and information revolution, which have been considered actually as important factors in the transformation of the very nature of power, its distribution and its source. Under this prism, NAI addresses two significant sources of exercising power. On the one hand, we have the hard power that refers to the employment of forceful means of invoking change, military and economic ones. And here we have the command power that rests on coercion or inducement. On the other hand, we have the soft power that refers to the employment of cultural or ideological ways to affect the behavior of others. And here we have the cooptive power that rests on the attractiveness of one's culture or ideology or the ability to set the agenda. So the prevailing culture and ideas and the control over the communication flow are prominent parameters of power here. On this ground, Turkey's soft power capital has been celebrated by research reports and mass media in terms of the increase in the demands for Turkish TV soap operas. For example, the Turkish Economic and Social Studies Foundation, TESEF, has conducted research the last 3 years to measure the perception of Turkey in the Middle East. The annual reports point out that Turkey is beginning to be a player in the cultural domain as well. And actually the report of 2010 concludes as follows. Indeed, television series have become an important part of Turkey's soft power. The number of people who watch Turkish TV series in the region is substantial, and this has the potential to have a lasting effect on Turkey's image. This rhetoric of Turkish soft power fits well with the political expectation of the Turkish political administration from the expansion in the region. Davutoglu's thesis of strategic depth is taken as the main indicator here of these aspirations, along of course with the recent critical arguments against this thesis, including neo-Ottomanist irredentism and the shift of axis. Still, these contesting views unite to indicate that the Turkish soft power is expected to lead to a certain level of diplomatic and strategic hard power over these regions, which constitute the former Ottoman hinterland. So Turkey's central geostrategic position across Balkans, the Middle East and the Caucasus, and its historical depth crystallized on the multicultural character of the Ottoman Empire register, according to Davutoglu, Turkey's value in world politics as a regional, international player in its own right. This revived narration of Turkish historic and cultural links provides the ideological platform for capitalizing its soft power potential, longing for the restoration of the unity of the dominant nation in the age of globalization. A few things about the popularity of Turkish soap operas in the two areas that we mentioned. The success of Turkish television series outside the country was soon considered as an indicator of the soft but lasting influence of Turkish image in the region. In the case of Middle East, according to TSEV reports, the Turkish soap operas, dubbed in Arabic, contribute significantly to the visibility of the country in the Middle East. The number of people who watch Turkish soap operas is substantial. It was 78% in 2010 and 74% in 2011. Since 2008, Turkish TV series have been constantly expanding their number of viewers throughout the Middle East, from Iran, Syria, and Iraq in the north, to Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco in the south. Most of the Turkish series are broadcast to the Arab world by Emirates and Saudi-based satellite channels, mostly at prime time. Some numbers, although some of them have already referred, the Turkish series market share among the foreign programs screened in the Middle East reached to 60%, and the share of the Turkish TV series among the Arab soap opera viewers is reportedly higher than 50%, with Syria and Iraq have gotten the highest number of relevant viewers. Of course, most of the viewers are women, and at the same time, Turkish soap stars have become pop idols around the Arab world. I skip some numbers that already mentioned about Gümüş, and I'm going to the case of Greece. Although here we don't have a relevant research about the popularity of Turkish soap operas, we draw actually on material and on statistical data from TV ratings and their analysis, both quantitative and qualitative, in order to sketch here the field. The first Turkish soap opera, Yabancı Damat, which is the love story of a Greek man and a Turkish woman, broadcast in Greece in 2005, at prime time zone of weekdays in summertime. During this time, of course, the programming environment is not a competitive one. However, the ratings of the Turkish soap opera were extremely high, reaching a share of 48%. More Turkish soap operas were broadcast on 3 Greek TV channels the last 3 years. There is a gap here between the first Turkish soap opera that broadcast on 2005 and the ones that followed starting from 2010. So just to give you an idea about these Turkish soap operas and for me to test my Turkish, here are some examples. Bilbir Gece, Aşk ve Ceza, Aşkın Memnu, Dudaktan Kalbe, Gümüş, and Ezel. When observing actually the programming of Turkish soap operas, we notice that after a short period of time that they have been positioned in prime time, in the beginning of the TV season, October, and where they reached a share of from 17 to 22%, they moved to off-peak time slots in the evening zone, where they have an average reach of 32%. Moreover, another statistic here is that although the first TV soap opera was a comedy with dramatic elements, Yabancı Damat, the rest are pure dramas. And let's move now to discuss a bit more about this success of the Turkish soap operas, and of course the issue of proximity comes here, the cultural relevance of the Turkish soap operas for the viewers in the region, which is certainly valid. Some parameters include historical ties, religion and tradition, aspirations and identifications, as well as imagined communities. In the case of Greece, several elements of cultural proximity can be traced between the two countries. Apart from the religious and linguistic differences, there is a great deal of historical, geographical and cultural relevance for their people. Under varied conditions, and for hundreds of years they lived together in the same lands, and later on, between 1922 and 1924, they exchanged populations. So they share places, climate influences, and other relationships with the environment, ways of living, memories, traditions, music and dances, food culture, gestures, and non-verbal communication as well. The Turkish soap operas depict several of these issues and characteristics, and they offer several occasions of identification for the Greek audience. Moreover, the clash between the Eastern and Western elements, or the interplay between them in Turkish soap operas, raise further questions for the Greek audience that still struggles to define itself in relation to the East and the West, reflecting accordingly. In addition, since Dallas of 80s, imagined soap opera communities have been observed to be formed over identification and aspiration, either in terms of finding in the protagonist story some reflection of the audience lifestyle, or wanting their life to be like the protagonist, or both. In the case of Greece, and out of the qualitative analysis of the ratings, we can identify two such communities: the people in the age group of 55 plus, and women in the age group from 15 to 24, as well as from 25 to 54. People in the age of 55 plus trace familiar places and times, reflect on similar life stories, and they identify with characters and roles in the family context. While in the case of women, share patterns and difficulties of the housewife life, the aspiration of active and independent roles in social life, as well as love stories and their emotional dilemmas bring them together. Another interesting point here is that Turkish actors participating in series broadcast in Greece are often admired by groups of young and sometimes not so young women. These groups meet on Facebook pages especially created for Turkish series and their idols. They exchange information, photos, episodic synopsis, news on the series, and information on the actors' personal lives, even months after the shows have ended on Greek TV. They even research information on series that haven't yet been broadcast in Greece, and of course which feature their favorite actors. Some of them include Halit Ergenç from Binbir Gece, and now he participates in Magnificent Century, Murat Yıldırım from Ask ve Ceza, and now he participates in Suskunlar, Kıvanç Tatlıtuğ, and Burak Haki. So now we can move to more proximities in the case of Middle East by Zafer.
Okay, I think most of them have been mentioned by Marwan anyway, especially the point about historical links, historical ties. I think a few things to add to that presentation. Now we can look at the kind of historical similarities and historical ties between, at a national level, between two communities. But maybe one more thing could be mentioned there, which is the fact that historically Istanbul has been one of the cultural capitals as much as political capitals of the Middle East in the past, in addition to Damascus and Cairo being the other capitals of the Middle East. Now, since the foundation of the Republic, these ties have been cut radically, and one thing we were asked to deny is our Middle Eastern proximities, actually, by the Republican ideology. But I think the popularity of Turkish soap operas, the recent popularity, should also be related to this this shift in the Turkish official ideology, or the transition in the Turkish official ideology as well, so that we are not so much embarrassed with our links with the Middle East anymore, I guess. That's one point. The other point is about Istanbul. Istanbul lost its status as a capital of the Middle East, as one of the capitals of the Middle East, with the Republic as well. And now I think we can look at it from this urban based point of view, saying that Istanbul is kind of in a sense reclaiming its status in the region as a city, because most of these cultural industries were built and based in Istanbul, and most of these soap operas are made and produced there. Another point is about another thing to add is this cross-national or transnational communities. As Benedict Anderson, as everybody knows about, when he talks about imagined communities, he was specifically talking about the nation building and the building of national identity. Now, Kevin Robbins, for example, in his Spaces of Identity, he suggests that this idea of national imagined community in the age of media has been changing with the kind of cross-national, transnational imagined communities. If so, what kind of cross-national imagined communities we can talk about in the case of Turkish soap operas and the Middle East? Now, I can identify two categories. One is youth, the other one is women. Kind of transnational imagined communities. Considering youth, the Arabic youth, in Ramallah, for example, there are two most popular cafes frequented by young people. One is called Nur, the other one is called Mohanna, two characters from Gümüş. Probably one to the one goes to boys, the other one goes to girls, I don't know. But now, I read in one of the commentaries, Owen Matthews' piece in Newsweek. He interviewed a Turkish academic, and she says that even Istanbul youth learn by watching Nur that there is kissing involved in lovemaking. Now, if this is so, if even the Istanbul youth is somehow learning something from sexual, from these series, then consider the Anatolian youth. The youth, which consists the majority of Turkish youth, who live in the province and Provence, and in the margins of the big cities, who constitute the majority of the Turkish youth. So therefore, I think they are their relationship, at least with these soap operas, is not so different. I mean, the majority of Turkish youth's relationship with these soap operas is not so much different from what the Arabic youth has been finding in them. They, the same, a similar thing applies to women. Now, especially the housewives. I think in every commentary we can see, we cannot talk about concrete research here, but we can look at the commentaries, and everybody talks about housewives and how they admire the Turkish soap operas the most. But this applies to Turkish housewives as well. So this applies to the proximities between the Turkish housewives' lives and the Middle Eastern housewives' lives in many senses. Regarding identification, the reflection of their life, or even their aspirations of a blonde husband, and so on. So we can talk about, for example, an imagined community, a transnational imagined community of sexually repressed youth, and another transnational imagined community of desperate housewives of Middle Eastern and Turkish women and Middle Eastern and Turkish youth. So, yeah, and one thing to add, again, Marwan's points about the criticism of Turkish soap operas in the Middle East being immoral is one of the main swear words, one of the main assaults in the around the Arab world I heard is that I saw your mother on Turkish TV, which is so it goes not without criticism and without a hostile look as well. There are other jokes as well, which I don't want to mention. They are even more rude than this. Okay.
So now that we have set the context, we can go on with some critical reflections. Since we consider that the relationship between soap opera invasion and soft power is a rather premature argument. To begin with, we need to consider the correspondence between economic, cultural, and political aspects of power, actually. Economically speaking, Turkish soap operas symbolize the growth in Turkish trade in the hinterland. A substantial growth in Turkish export has been tangible during the recent decade. Thus, soap opera invasion is suitable to be viewed as one of the economic items of export of Turkish growing cultural industry, similar to the growth in exports in construction, food processing, home appliance, as well as textile and tourism sectors. In fact, the answer to the questions in TESEV research of 2011, have you ever consumed a Turkish product and have you ever watched a Turkish TV series, had exactly the same percentage. 74% of them said yes. Moreover, as it concerns Greece, the economic crisis has played an important role in the introduction of Turkish soap operas in the Greek TV schedules. As I mentioned before, the first one it was introduced in 2005. This was very, very successful, but it was 5 years later that we had the next Turkish soap operas. The domestic production of series has decreased significantly because of the crisis, taking also into account that Greece as a small country has a limited market and as such not enough resources to produce national programs. And as it concerns the cultural level, we can compare the recent leap forward of the Turkish soap operas with the experience of the popularity of Mexican and Brazilian telenovelas the last decades in Turkey as well as in Greece. For example, in Greece, the TV seasons from 2002 to 2005, we had 16 Latin telenovelas that were broadcast per year. Here we have another example of cultural proximity, which in spite of geographical distance, it is the global attraction of melodrama as a genre that made this wave of popularity possible at that time. This kind of the shared perception of middle-class life as a universal melodrama that attracts the general audience. However, there are not tangible diplomatic or strategic consequences for Greece or Turkey of this 2-decade-long cultural invasion, not even probably for the countries that had further proximities. So this temporality could well be the fate of the current Turkish cultural invasion, plus the economic factors that were addressed before and the political ones that we're moving now with Sefer.
Okay. In terms of politics, I think much has been said about, especially in the morning, about Turkey's new diplomatic positioning and the kind of discussion about shift of axis and so on. What we can add to all this is probably we should look at this seriously. First of all, the kind of Turkey's as a government, as a state, and as a society, how does it reorient itself? And this requires a long discussion on both identity and foreign politics at the same time. But also we should look at the hierarchical order between the global power and the regional powers, and how also the Turkey positions itself within this kind of network of global power and regional powers positioned around the world. Thirdly, of course, we can look at the perception of the Arab world, where Turkey is or not seen as a model of a good synthesis of Islam and modernity and democracy and secularism and Islam at the same time, etc. But all these require long discussions. What we can look at here probably is again the report of TESEV, where how much this cultural popularity is translated into political popularity around the Arab world. Of course, the research is not directly about this, but looking at the answers about questions like, do you think Turkey should interfere into the Arab-Israeli conflict, for example? People who say they watch Turkish soap operas say that no, yes, Turkey should interfere into the conflict between Arabs and Israelis. But when they are asked, should Turkey interfere into the intra-Arab affairs, like the problems between Arab states, most of the people who watch Turkish soap operas say no. This is our kind of intra-Arab affairs, not. It does not concern Turkey. Others asked about, do you see Turkey as a leading country in the Middle East? In Egypt and in Libya and Tunisia, the ratings are high, but in Syria and Iraq, it's very low. It's not only the relations are different. Turkey is more popular in Egypt, Libya, and Tunisia, but also Turkey is very close. It's bordering Iraq and Syria. So people are concerned about this kind of leadership argument as well. So since we run out of time, we'll leave the conclusions to the discussion. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our third presentation is by Yeşim Kaptan, one of the organizers of this colloquium, again from the home university. And her paper is entitled Proximity in Modernity, Reflections on the Reception of Turkish Melodramas in the Middle East. 20 minutes.
Actually, as you see in the PowerPoint, I changed my title a little bit because I first wrote the abstract and then I did research, and then now I'll mostly talk about not modernity with proximity, but modernity, proximity, cultural proximity and difference. During 2000s, the television formats have become one of the most important materials of Turkey and ignited a debate on Turkish media about modernity and socio-cultural impact of Turkey in neighboring regions. For many, the success of Turkish TV series in the Middle East, Balkans, and Eastern European countries signifies the articulation of culture and capital on a more productive level in Turkey after the 1980s. In 2000s, with the rise of neoconservative Islamic Party AKP into power, Turkey started to see itself at the center of new so-called previously periphery countries. These discourses relocate Turkey on the stage of world culture and politics in a recursively globalizing world. Discourses also focus on Turkey's potential to become a leader in the region region, while discursively reconstructing Turkey as an alternative model of modernity and primary point of reference for other cultures and societies. Within this backdrop, when I decided to write a paper by analyzing how Turkish newspapers present and discuss the rise of Turkish cultural products in the neighboring regions, I was planning to answer why Turkish dramas have prompted Turkish press to talk about contentious issues such as modernity, tradition, Islam, culture, etc. Actually, I found all of these, yet more than that, I found discourses of difference and proximity in Turkish press. Therefore, in this paper, by exploring disputes over representations of Turkish television series in neighboring countries and discourses around the successful Turkish television series in the Turkish newspaper, I examined contested and conflicting debates and articulations of different discourses over the meanings of proximity and difference in Turkish press. Analyzing the complex associations between audience and cultural text in Turkish newspapers bring me the concept of cultural proximity. Lapastina and Strobar discuss cultural proximity at multiple levels. It can be geographic, spatial, and also, Zafer Can Pantelis talked about it, religious, linguistic, ethnic, diasporic, and gender-related proximities. In this paper, I use the term cultural proximity in the sense offered by Koichi Iwabuchi. Iwabuchi says, quote, "Cultural proximity cannot be seen as essential quality of culture or audience orientation, but rather a shifting phenomenon in dialectical relation to other cultural forces," end quote. Therefore, in understanding of newspaper discourses on success of Turkish melodramas, I'll take into account of contested discourse, linguistic struggles, heated debates, and their relation to other cultural forces within the order of discourses. From Iwabuchi's perspective, cultural proximity is not something out there, but needs to be subjectively identified and experienced by the audience. It is based on awareness of similarity rather than ontological cultural similarities. Although language is one of the major levels of similarity, there are other elements of proximity in culture such as music, traditions, religious elements, ethnic types, gestures, humors, dress, etc. Thus, different agents bring diversity of discourses into dialogue, such as economic, religious, cultural discourses, to illuminate reasons behind popularity of Turkish melodramas abroad and accordingly account of proximity between Turkey and neighboring regions. On rhetorical level, proximity, a popular concept of interviews and commentaries, were uttered multiple times by many actors. For instance, İzzet Pinto, he is the CEO of Global Agency. And Global Agency is one of the major companies which distribute Turkish TV series in the Middle East. Reflects on this in an interview on Habertürk when he answers the question of journalists about reasons behind the popularity of Turkish TV series in Balkans and the Middle East, and he says, and I quote here, "Asian people do not share any proximity with region, both culturally and physically. Latin soap operas getting boring. American TV series are culturally distant from our culture. Our TV series are good alternatives." In this statement, Pinto offers some insights into the concept of proximity on global scale. The first point of Pinto about proximity is manifesting the perception of other as Asian bodies and cultures. While Latin American cultural products, which were very popular in the Middle East during the 80s and 90s, and also Marwan Kredi wrote about it, are described as boring, and despite their global success, US programs are presented culturally distanced, which signifies a global and Western form of modernity in terms of lifestyle. Finally, Pinto asserts a self-reflexive turn, which presents Turkish TV series as good alternatives to all other unfamiliar cultures and cultural products. Repetition of "our," you'll see it here, is prominent in the statements. According to Greg Urban, "Our as cultural motion is significant for the circulation of discourse that is necessary for a significant number of individuals to come to articulate their membership in a group of we." The proximity discourse offers a broader category both to Turkish and transnational audience who are looking for alternatives and feeling proximate to Turkish culture. Other actors also underline the importance of proximity at multiple levels to explain the success of these TV series in the Middle East, Balkans, and Central Asia. For example, Kemal Uzun, the director of Gümüş Nur, which is the most popular Turkish television series in the Middle East, as Marwan and Zafer mentioned, says, neither the characters and the subject matter nor the featured locations are foreign to viewers. They don't feel like outsiders. Our cultures are close, our geographies are close, we have close ties. While the chairman of the board of directors, Kalinos Holding, Fırat Gürgen, is framing how the adventure of exploring Turkish TV series started in 2001, he endorses Uzun's argument. Gürgen says that they exported first delivered to countries which are culturally proximate to Turkey, such as Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. He added that, why do they watch Turkish TV series? Turkish dramas become popular in these regions. You can read it here also. Because of Turkish culture, till now they watched Brazilian soap operas and they saw churches in the background. In our television dramas, they see mosques. I'm not saying that these dramas have religious content, but the audience members find themselves in these dramas. They hear Inshallah, Mashallah, which they use daily. Gürgen emphasizes that not only cultural, historical, and regional, but also religious proximity, and to extent a language proximity comes play a significant role and creates familiarity based on Islam. As a general category, Turkish agents consider excessive proximity between Turkey and neighboring regions. The discourses emphasize cultural proximity. Turkish agents imply that cultural commonalities are created by shared historical experiences, collective regional values, and geographic proximity. They envisage an artificial familiarity with other nations in the Middle East and Balkans based on a totalizing and homogenizing approach. While their discourse undermines and ignores subnational, regional, and local identities of non-Turkish audiences, mentioning them as Tunisians, Arab or Arab women, Albanians, non-Turkish agents emphasize distinctions and strive to maintain a sense of difference from Turkish culture and society. Therefore, there is a striking difference between agents from Turkey and other countries. And after that point, I mentioned them as Turkish agents and non-Turkish agents. Although discourses of non-Turkish actors in newspapers are diverse and complex, these agents bring their own discourses with them, which are extremely different from Turkish agents' rather optimistic and hegemonic discourses entailing proximity. The commentaries of some non-Turkish agents prominently challenge and undermine statements of Turkish agents. For instance, NBC Arabia representative to Turkey, Daniel Abdülfettah, says, Arabs and Turks do not know each other very well. We have not done propaganda using these Turkish dramas. We see them as a medium of entertainment and culture. After this TV series, people who didn't know Turkey well began to perceive Turkey better. And similarly, a Bosnian Turkologist, Amine Jasankovic says, the prejudice towards Turkey in the Balkans has changed after the broadcast of Turkish TV series in this region. Serbians and Croatians who had Turkey changed their minds because of the positive impact of Turkish TV series. Even, you know, she says 7 baklava stores opened in 2010 because of the impact of Turkish TV series in Syria. And she adds that even the non-Turkish agents acknowledge that there is proximity in local and national cultures of Turkey and the Arab world expresses their confusion. For example, Fahad El-Shabani, the chief executive of Saudi Arabia Airlines, declares that it is hard to believe that Turkish TV series created a remarkable impact. In these statements, Abdülfettah and Jasankovic describe how people in the Middle East and Balkans perceive Turkey. Unlike Turkish agents, their statements highlight distance and even hostility between nations. While commenting on the winds of change in these regions, they depict a negative image of Turkey in Balkans and Arab Peninsula. Even El-Shabani's fairly moderate statement expresses astonishment for starting success of Turkish melodramas. As opposed to rhetoric of Turkish agents, words such as similarity, sameness, closeness, or local, that are commonly used by foreign experts, are not commonly used by foreign experts and agents. Rather, they use emotional language like hate, prejudice, surprise, and focus on distance and difference rather than intensity and intimacy. These non-Turkish agents shifted the discourse of proximity and reversed the discursive strategies of Turkish agents on newspapers. Here, experts and cultural agents provide an alternative discourses to proximity discourse, which becomes an important factor in struggle over the discursive practices. The shifting presentations of those practices map out potential protagonist and antagonist struggles for hegemony in the media, or potential alliances and accommodations. We witness strong discursive associations among Turkish agents and foreign experts for positioning Turkey within a wide cultural geography of the region. This becomes more prominent in rhetorical criticism of Turkey by Middle Eastern agents. The headline of Zaman on December 3rd is an example of it. They say, this is the headline, Tunisian Professor Ayari, Turkish TV series do not represent Turkish people. The Middle Eastern scholars and journalists who attended the panel criticized Turkish drama as immoral and non-Islamic. Ayari says that Turkish TV series has a negative impact on the Arab world. They do not represent Turkish people. We know that Turks do not have extramarital relations and they do not drink alcohol as we see in the TV series. And here we all know that that's true, right? The general director of the Turkish radio and television TRT, Ibrahim Şahin, who was the moderator of the panel, urged producers and scriptwriters to act more responsibly and carefully about this issue. Hamid El-Turki, the editor-in-chief of El-Vaha magazine in Oman, states that since values represented in Turkish dramas are not proximate to our culture, TV series which depict real lives of Turks must be produced. And through negation of cultural proximity, these statements brought up the problem of representation in the TV series by claiming that these are false representations of Turkish society. Agents claim that virtual reality on TV reversed the reality in everyday life. By articulating a real-life discourse, Middle Eastern agents bring another discourse to the debate that challenges proximity discourse, which is predominant in the dialogue of Turkish newspapers and agents. They suggest cultural proximity is only possible if Turkish dramas depict ordinary lives of ordinary Turkish people. Their statements introduce a religious discourse that centers a conservative moral Islamic lifestyle, which is proposed a contingent layer of proximity. While Middle Eastern presenters treat TV series as media representations, the rhetoric of Turkish actors create a great contrast with their statements. Their assertions, based largely on the assumption that reality is always represented on media, confront real-life discourse of other agents. Turkish agents abolish absolute distinction between what is real and what is fictional, and by articulating the discourse of representation to the discourse of proximity, they attempt to eliminate the distinction between us and them. Therefore, this discourse increased self-awareness and heightens self-consciousness of the reader. In this context, Turkish newspapers work like cultural performances. Barbara Babcock claims that all forms of cultural performance do more than reflect social cultural patterns and beliefs. They reflexively comment upon those patterns and alter society's awareness of itself. In other words, the proximity discourse doubles the subject and the object. It produces the reflexivity for the Turkish audience, and it changes things into a spectacle, spectacles into things, myself into another, and another into myself. Babcock's reflexivity describes the capacity of language and of thought refers back to itself. In these articles, everything refers back to Turkey, Turkish culture, and Turkish identity. It's a representation of otherness as well as self-representation. According to Babcock, reflexivity is a process linking self and other, subject and the object. In this discursive process, the other non-Turkish audiences of Turkish TV series in this case becomes Turkish as well as Turks change into the other. On newspaper pages, reader transforms a spectacle object for itself. The self is reconstructed in the minds of readers from a different perspective, and this reconstruction increases self-awareness through self-referentiality. When I employ the term self, it should be understood not as an individual entity, yet as a collective ontological subjectivity, mostly for Turkish agents. And through self-referentiality and reflexivity, Turkish agents enact active agency that results in self-empowerment. As a result, self-referentiality and self-empowerment bring about the illusion of the supremacy of the self and the discursively creates superiority over the others, which becomes the source of hegemony. In conclusion, in Turkish press, Turkish agents emphasize connections and articulations between distinct identities. The proximity discourse is the glue that connects different identities and assumes a singular identity or audience on a vast geography from Eastern Europe to Arab Peninsula. On the contrary, non-Turkish agents underline the multiplicity of identities and differences rather than similarities and familiarities. The negation of proximity and marking of differences and distance strive to establish an alternative politics of representation in order to construct self. These representations in Turkish newspapers employ reflexivity, which I call reflexive representations of Turkish culture and society, as well as Turkish identity. The idea behind this argument is that all collective representations and system of signification are reflexive. Reflexivity here is key to understand how Turks represent and perceive themselves in the discourse of newspapers and why Turkish and non-Turkish agents use different discursive strategies within the order of discourses. Reflexivity is not only the condition in the minds of the self, but also it is the imagined effect of this reflection upon another's mind. Therefore, these articles refer to the Turkish image in another's mind, while also representing the self-image of Turks. This self-image, from a Turkish perspective, becomes more striking in the discourses of Turkish newspapers by articulating reflexivity and self-referentiality to evoke self-empowerment, and is marked by a wide-ranging rhetorical battles between Turkish and non-Turkish actors. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this presentation. And our last paper is by Altuğ Akın, again from the host university, Faculty of Communications. And his paper is entitled Images of Europe and the Self, Eurovision Song Contest as an Instance of Transnational Communication. So please.
I think we talked enough about TV melodramas and series. Now we will be talking about another TV product that has been with us for more than half a century, Eurovision Song Contest. I think we're all familiar with what I'm talking about. I think everybody here knows what is Eurovision, isn't it? Okay. My presentation will be based on my PhD dissertation, which I defended 5 months ago in Autonomous University of Barcelona, Spain. It was entitled Fields of Popular Communication Beyond the Nation, a study of Eurovision Song Contest as product and as production. Before everything, maybe I should make my motivations and position quite clear. My choice to study Eurovision is not because I like Eurovision. I don't like it musically or culturally. I have to make this explanation many times, because oftentimes when you say that you're studying Eurovision, the faces you encounter are not very serious. It's just like small smiles, and people kind of question if I'm nuts or not. But anyway, the reason was more serious. I wanted to take it seriously based on this small quotation from Bowman, who's an ethnomusicologist from the United States, and he says in his 2004 work called Music and Nationalism, if we're willing to listen, the half century of Eurovision Song Contest tells us a great deal about Europe and its modern history. At virtually every crucial moment, European history, the Eurovision was present, revealing something about the national politics of the moment. My point was not too much about national politics. In my research, I tried to listen or study the Eurovision from the perspective of media and communication instead of national politics. And I wanted to get a better grip of the social space that the Eurovision has been occupying in last half a century in regards with communication in general and in regards with transnational communication in particular. Why should it be studied? there are some unique things about Eurovision. Some of them are about time, the others are about space. Regarding time, it's been with us, with this continent, with this planet since 1956 without any pause, and it's been reaching millions of people every year, more than 60 countries most recently. And in addition to these quantitative characteristics which make it unique, there are some important socio-cultural and political aspects of Eurovision. First of all, it was an initial attempt to promote a pan-European audiovisual communication platform. This started with, in 1954 with the Eurovision News Exchange, and then in 2 years, in 1956, Eurovision Song Contest was established. So it was a very important initial attempt to bring Europe together through television. And in the history of it's more than 55 years this year, it gained a kind of discursive platform meaning, where the ideas of what is the national, who is the other, what is the European, how should they be represented, all these ideas, all these things were negotiated, they were defined and redefined, and they were represented in this platform. So these things give Eurovision a kind of an analytical meaning. You can observe many things when you look at Eurovision. So my objectives very basically were reaching to a better understanding of transnational communication as it takes place around popular media events such as Eurovision. So it's not only Eurovision that I'm interested. You can easily include all the international sportive events such as Olympic Games and football competitions, because they also have a kind of transnational audience. They are events. I will talk about this genre in a few minutes. So I wanted to understand what's happening all around these things. This was the broad objective. In more concrete, I wanted to propose a theoretical and methodological approach for studying that kind of communication processes which extend beyond national scope. I wanted to understand the role of popular media products in transnational communication processes. And finally, I wanted to understand the dynamics which sustain these popular communicative processes as they are. So I wanted to understand what made Eurovision as it is today. Okay, I won't go into the details of my objectives, but I will talk more about the conceptualization. Having done my theoretical research about the existing academic work about Eurovision, I realized that one of the main lacks, my main gaps, was about kind of contextualization of Eurovision in a more radical way. It was either studied from the textual perspective, from discourses, but it wasn't contextualized radically. This is a term I borrowed from Pierre Bourdieu, which I will talk about in a few minutes. So I used two different perspectives which are actually quite close to each other. One of them was the production of culture approach from American sociological tradition, and the other one was theory of cultural field associated mostly with Pierre Bourdieu. So the production of culture perspective gave an important focus on the produced symbols, which is, for instance, a television program, but also it gives a very important priority to the structural, organizational, institutional, and economical factors which are around this symbolic product. On the other hand, the theory of cultural field of Bourdieu is a very, let's say, holistic perspective that takes into consideration not only the cultural works themselves, but also producers' works in terms of their strategies and trajectories, as well as their objective positions in the field. So this meant I had to deal with the producers, the people who produce actually Eurovision. It also entails the analysis of the structure of the field itself. So field is a very key concept in my work. And then finally, it provides an analysis of the position of the field within the broader field of power. So this power might be economical power, political power, or any cultural power. So both sides of production, circulation, and consumption of symbolic goods must be taken into consideration in the scope of the understanding of the field. So based on these two approaches, I conceptualized Eurovision as a culture production field more than anything. So I thought about it as a social universe with its own laws of functioning and understood it in the broader context of transnational communication. So the four key points based on these conceptual basis were that the Eurovision, first of all, as a cultural product, is sustained by a particular international production field. Secondly, the national fields of production are equally important for understanding what's happening from a communication perspective. Both of these two fields are interrelated with each other, so international field and national field are interrelated, and also economical and political fields are heavily influencing these two fields. And fourthly, objective structures of these two fields and subjective experiences of the agents and organizations. So this is concretely about what to study. In my case, it was, on the Turkish side, it was TRT, Turkish Radio Television, and the people working in TRT in regards with production of Eurovision, and many other people that I will talk about. Methodology, a very brief idea. Again, following Bourdieu's approach, first I looked at the visible aspects of the Eurovision, which meant the program itself, so television output, and then I went to the less visible or invisible aspects, which is the production side. So first of all, the study of product, textually, spatially, and temporally. Genre study, we can say, and then I switched my focus to the producer side, which were agents and organizations, meaning the singers who represented Turkey in Eurovision, presenters, the people we see in the television program themselves, or different broadcasting institutions, including TRT and EBU, European Broadcasting Union. In the fourth chapter, I had the historical examination of these two institutions, EBU and Eurovision, and in the fifth chapter, I did my field work in Turkish side. So some of the conclusions, or I'm following my thesis structure, is about, the first part was about the study of the program itself, which had to do with television programming narration. So three important or essential features of any television narrative, which are succession, repetition, and series, can be observed in Eurovision as well. And that's very important to understand what happens on the audience side, because how the program is tells very much about how it works in the social sphere. So different segments of the Eurovision program, for instance, introduction, performances of each country, interval act, and the conclusion part results, are repeated in a successive way. So each of these segments have their internal narratives, and as a whole they constitute an annual Eurovision program. And repetition is, we can observe repetition in two manners in Eurovision. One of them is the short-term performance, where each performance of each country, Turkey follows Greece, Greece follows whatever, but these are actually the same format, so there is a repetition within the program. In the long-term repetition, we see more or less the same format of the program since 1956, has been going on for every year almost, with slight changes, but the major characteristic of the format is still the same. So because of this repetition, we can actually think about Eurovision as a yearly television series. It happens once in a year. Now, in the last 5-6 years, we have 3 nights every year, but actually, from 1 year to year, we know that it will be coming the next year. More or less the same program, same questions, and same feelings. So we must talk about the genre a bit, if we're talking about the television program, and two main genres that really form the basis of Eurovision. One of them is a classical television characteristic genre, which is variety show of early television period, family television period, and the aim is maximizing the number of audiences. This might be the kids, family, all members of the family, so there are different components. There are some comedy parts, there are some songs, so the aim is attracting whole family, providing different components in a program. And second genre that is heavily observable in Eurovision is media event of contest type. And here the idea of this typology provided by Diana and Katz in 1992, which is revised and revised again and again, but the basics are still applicable to Eurovision. The idea is there are rules, there is a battle, but there are rules of this battle, so the competitors begin the battle in the same position, and the underlying message that is provided to the audiences is who will win this year. So rules are so important, the teams are starting in the same beginning line, and the idea is who will win this year's competition. So, and about time and space, we can say two important characteristics of Eurovision is simultaneity and liveness, and these are two major components of the program that enforces the community creation function of the Eurovision program, dispersed in a huge international geography. Okay, about the international field of production, the structure and the agents who are involved in the international production of Eurovision. three essential characteristics of this international field of Eurovision's production actually tell quite a lot about what happens on the communication side. First of all, it's an international distributed competition of songs that originate from different countries. This means that the songs or the components of the program come from different countries, so there is not a domination of any country in the program. Everybody contributes more or less equally to each year's program. Turkey sends a song, Greece sends another song, so we watch the whole program. That's very important from another perspective that I will talk. Secondly, it's decentralized, produced, meaning that there is not a center of production. Each year the competition travels from one capital to the other. So every year the host of the production is another country, which gives lots of chances for any host country to impose their any idea, positively or negatively, on the production of the event. And thirdly, maybe the most important one regarding this transnational aspect, is it's an outcome of cooperation among television broadcasters from different countries. And these broadcasters may sometimes have different and sometimes conflicting interests. This is very important for understanding why in Turkey Eurovision is experienced as a more like a battle than a festival. About the way these broadcasters, the producers, relate to each other, we see two ways of relating. One of them is cooperation and interdependency on the, let's say, positive side, and on the negative side, we can easily say that there is a conflict and competition between and among the broadcasters as well. Not only the singers, but broadcasters are competing as well. We always remember this year in Turkey it was very obvious when we hosted in 2004, we must do the best Eurovision ever, was the rhetoric of the TRT before the show, because they wanted to prove that they are better than the other broadcasters who had hosted before. So because of these, and also it's important that the resources and capitals are not evenly distributed among these broadcasters or the agents in the field. And because of this, the texture of Eurovision since the beginning, since 1956, has been marked by, on one hand, this competition, battle, rivalry, but at the same time we can see some feelings such as cooperation, festival, or friendship among the agents in the field. If you look to the national side, I did my work on the Turkish side, so I'm familiar, but I observed as the Swedish side, Spanish side, and British side as well. Some general things can be said for almost every country, that the main actors in a national field of production of Eurovision are participating broadcasters, TRT in Turkish case, music and entertainment sector, because they provide the musicians, dancers, all choreographers, and everybody that we see on the stage. But at the same time we have the media, not the broadcaster itself, but the rest of the media, who are sometimes very much conflicting, but sometimes they are very supportive. So these actors are very important to understand what happens in a country about Eurovision. And these different agents and institutions relate to each other in multi-layered ways. And this is, again, cooperation, interdependency. These are the terms that I borrowed from terminology of Bourdieu about field theory, because he stresses heavily that agents and organizations in any field relate to each other both in a cooperation and interdependence way, but at the same time in a conflict and competition way. It depends on the settings and the context. And in any country, the interrelations between the field of production of Eurovision and other fields, say political field and international field of Eurovision, are vital. And a very brief example, in 1977, when Israel was going to host the event, Turkish radio television said that if the event will be organized in Jerusalem, Turkey will not participate, we will withdraw. Because they said that Turkey's Arab neighbors would be offended from a show that is organized in Jerusalem and Turkey's participation there. So they said that if it is taken to Tel Aviv, we will be there, but if it will be done in Jerusalem, we will not be there. And this was a direct order from the foreign ministry. It wasn't a choice of Turkish radio television. And finally, Israeli broadcaster IBA rejected, and it was done in Tel Aviv, and Turkey did not participate that year. And they paid quite a lot of money for this. And each participant country's way of relating to Eurovision has been different depending on the meaning of Eurovision in their social imaginary and on the result of combined effort of the agency in national field. So I will talk about Turkish case in a bit more detail respecting my time. Okay. In Turkish social imaginary, we're all familiar with this. That's the reason why I'm doing this. But Eurovision always had a special place in relationship with the ideas of what is Europe, if we are a part of Europe, if the Europeans like us, and that kind of social imaginary components. And in the ephemeral communicative spaces formed around yearly Eurovision competitions and national competitions, these issues have been framed and reframed by different agents and heavily debated. And two dominant concerns have formed the contours of imagination about Eurovision in Turkey. One of them was receiving good results, and the second one was representing Turkey decently. This definition of decently is very sensitive, but representing Turkey decently in the international Eurovision platform. And because of this, Eurovision has been perceived as a perfect platform where Turkey's Europeanness can be performed to Europe, and at the same time, Europe's approval of this performance can be sought. And two major lines of imaginations about Eurovision have been dominant, and the first one, where it is perceived as a battle, competition, rivalry, source of difference, has been more dominant than the second one, which is where it is perceived as a festival, cooperation, friendship, or source of similarity. And here I will give a very small example. This is the word of, for instance, one of the producers of Eurovision in TRT. For years we didn't understand how to be successful in Eurovision. It was as if we're competing in a car race with a motorbike. When we understood what to do in this competition and what not to do, we did much better and finally won it in 2003 with Startup. So we learned how to conquer Europe, but it was a different way than what we had followed for years. So this is a producer's perspective. And now another perspective, a more positive one, comes from a Eurovision fan, member of a Eurovision fan club in Turkey, and he says, we just love this thing called Eurovision. It's basically a heart and soul thing. The time we spend during the Eurovision week is just like a fairy tale. It is like the Woodstock Festival of the hippies in 1960s. You get out of the real world and you are in a different world with 2,000 and 3,000 Eurovision fans like yourself from different countries. Another one, the Eurovision as a concept is in sharp contrast with the mindset that has been intended to be imposed on us in this country. The only friend of the Turk is the Turk and the rest is the enemy. Nobody can make me say that Armenians or Greeks are enemies, because I go there to Eurovision finals and I see that he is a human being just like me. So actually the Eurovision is ridiculing this old farce that they want to make us believe in this country. So it's obvious that there are different imaginations, but for both sides, both for the publics that see positive things in Eurovision and the ones that try to conquer Europe, the connection is very affectionate. It's very, very affectionate. There is an enthusiasm when people talk about Eurovision. So some small conclusions. I want to respect my time. As an image-based symbolic form, the Eurovision, since the beginning, has been made available by transnational media flows. That's obvious. And in consequence, it has triggered multiple and diverse imaginations. The ones that I showed are obvious. And it has also enabled imagined communities of audiences. For instance, the imagined communities of Eurovision fans all over the world is a very strong imagined community. And it has also fed social imaginaries of different sorts, both national and transnational and European ones. I argue that these findings that I find out from the Eurovision can be generalized to most of the transnational communicative spaces which emerge around visually and narratively staged image-based products and events. And these are the things that we've been talking for since the morning, but these kind of transnational communication spaces are spaces which are full of conflicts. So it's not a homogeneous group, but there are different groups of thoughts shaped by multiplicity of imaginations. These spaces have an ephemeral, fragmentary, and unstable nature, obviously, and these spaces inhabit a universalistic and particularistic dimension which pushes the tendencies of sameness and the difference at the same time. And finally, affections play a significant role in this kind of communicative processes, most of the time much more the ratio. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much to all our presenters in this session. We have about 20 minutes, and the floor is open for questions and comments from the audience. Naomi?
Shall I stay with the mic? Thanks. I was sorry that we didn't get to the final slide of Pantelis and Zafir, because I saw there was something about contrasting between soft power and hegemony, because I was going to make the point that that maybe the sort of binarization of hard power and soft power is kind of, it sort of leads us down the wrong path anyway, because Susan Strange's construction of structural power, which kind of brings together the technical, financial, militaristic, and knowledge, kind of gives you perhaps a more realistic way of understanding and measuring what might be going on within the so-called soft power arena. And it immediately makes you think that in the Hollywood case, that there's sort of, the archetypal example of soft power, it was backed up by government intervention from the beginning of the 20th century. So, I mean, that was just really, would like to see the last slide and hear the conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to go to?
Yeah. Okay, I mean, our conclusion is more or less the same, quite similar, approximately, let's say. Now, the idea of soft power, the terminology of soft and hard power entered into the literature quite recently, as I understand it. But this kind of literature also ignores the whole literature of political theory that has been produced, as I understood before itself. And one of the problems that we have noticed as reading about soft and hard power concepts is that this soft power, would it lead to some kind of hard power? If so, how? What are the mechanisms that link them together, etc.? These are not clear. You have some kind of soft power going on and on, like the Brazilian telenovelas. They can go on forever, but never the Brazilians come and sell anything to us or govern us. Yeah. But at the same time, if we look at Dallas, for example, Dallas comes not from Brazil, but from US, and it comes from a country who can invade us if they want to, anytime. And therefore we love Dallas for other reasons or for some other mechanism. It's not soft power, but it's part of an hegemonic power. And this is exactly why Gramsci's terminology is more relevant, or even the classical Marxist terminology is more relevant when talking about this kind of stuff. It looks like this is the kind of cultural imperialism that is that is talked about with the soft power, without the real imperialist power behind it. And what is the point of that? Where does it lead to? How this is linked with the soft and with the hard power as such, or how they are combined, the soft and hard power, is really questionable. These are like open ends in the whole theoretical framework.
More questions and comments from the audience?
Hello. My question is about the soap operas. I'm not very sure, but it looks like they are telling romanticized stories about the financial elites in the Turkish soap operas. I'm not very sure, but is it so? I mean, Aşk-ı Memnu and so on.
Some of them.
My question is there a cultural similarity, or these countries who are watching these Turkish serials have similarities in ways of the financial gap between the rich and poor people? Maybe they are curious to the Turkish culture in the ways they are curious to their own financial elites. Can it be possible?
Would you guys like to take up the question?
Absolutely. I think that is the case. But the difference is, take any example. Let's take Saudi Arabia, where Gümüş was a big splash. Saudi Arabia definitely has a financial lead. The gap between the top people and the bottom people, I don't know for a fact, but it's probably not that different from Turkey's. But the difference is that elite is not visible in the same way that they are made visible in Gümüş. It's not just financially, we're talking business, the association of business, politics, organized crime, all that. So I think it's the visibility of the private lives of that elite that could be interesting. And sure enough, if you look at some of the recent Gulf drama series that I've been reading about, but haven't watched yet, because they're going to come in Ramadan. Some of them apparently are about the life of the elites, which promises some fireworks. So it could be. So what you're saying is, instead of kind of other culture type of proximity, you're talking about class issues.
I guess it's not about the Turkishness or the similarity in culture. It looks like they are also interested in their own financial elite or their romanticized stories, and maybe they see the Turkish case similar to them, and they are watching pure from interest to their own stories in their own countries.
I mean, in Gümüş, there's definitely the element that you find in some, I hate to use universal, but it's a trope that you find in some of Marilyn Monroe's movies to soap operas, in telenovelas, definitely Mexican telenovelas, about the poor woman who typically comes from the hinterland, from a rural background, who marries into the big, powerful family, who faces resistance and who's eventually accepted. Either accepted by those who oppose her or by destroying those who oppose her. And so this is definitely the same narrative, or a similar narrative.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. When I was doing this research, probably it will be still in progress, and it will be my next project. But there is definitely a heavily neoliberal discourse, economic discourse, in all these newspapers and in every issue that they discuss in the series. In one of the interviews, for instance, one of the guys says, the more we show Istanbul and the more we show the richer lives, the lives of the rich people, it gets more popular in the Middle East. But it says it's specifically for the Middle East, not for Balkans or Eastern European countries. But I think it's the dominance of neoliberal discourse from the economic perspective that the Middle Eastern audience would like to see the richer lives, the lives of rich people, the upper class lives, and then Istanbul specifically in this TV series, which tells me a lot about how the elites or the representation of the lives of the elites are becoming more transnational in this sense.
Thank you.
What?
For the sake of discussion, maybe I ask 3 questions, starting with Marwan. I know the TESEV research on public opinion of Turkey in the Middle East. They have done twice. But in Turkey, we discuss the question of how much that increased positive perception of Turkey in this region reflect on Turkish foreign policy. Is there a connect or disconnect between positive perception at the level of popular culture and Turkey's soft power influence on these countries? For instance, right now, it seems to be disconnect, that people like Turkey, elites do not like Turkish government and Turkish things. So I was wondering, what would you say, someone living there? Is it really soft power that this popular culture, is reflecting on the state elite and the state perception of Turkey?
Well, I mean, so a couple of things. I think in this sense it's significant that Istanbul is the iconic city and not Ankara. I think that's an important point for various reasons. It's a kind of a culture, finance, business, the Bosphorus, the old imperial capital that somehow Arabs still have links to. But I think the more significant problem when we're speaking about elites is what elites are we talking about? Are we talking about the elites that were
the state elite, like Turkey's soft power in changing Arab
but
states?
the Arab state elites have changed for the most part in the last couple of years. And we know, for instance, without any doubt, that the dominant force that's emerging is the brand of Islamism connected to the Muslim Brotherhood, which has a lot of affinities with the AKP. So we know for a fact that leaders throughout the region, from Tunisia to Libya and Tunisia are the most obvious. Whatever happens in Syria, that seems the direction in which things are moving into. that there are huge affinities with the current elite in Turkey. Now, and there's enough evidence to suggest that in most of the Arab world there's some affinity with Arab populations. The problem is with Saudi Arabia. The exception in public discourse about Turkey comes from Saudi Arabia. The Saudis are not comfortable with the new Saudi role for two reasons. One of them is that they've demonized Iran for being the Shias and the extraterrestrials and the green monsters and all that. They can't do the same thing to Turkey because Sunni Islam is shared as the predominant religion. That's number one. Point number two, though, and I think that's where it's very important, is that Saudi Arabia really fears the Muslim Brotherhood. Because they, especially the Crown Prince, the new Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia speaks of the Muslim Brotherhood literally like it's the devil. Why? Because he feels that it provides an alternative ideology to the dominant, Salafi Wahhabi ideology in Saudi Arabia that they feel has traction among the Arab population. So they're very nervous about this because they feel that any alternative ideology that is couched in Sunni Islam could be potentially a rival. And since Saudi Arabia is, that's one of the reasons why the Saudis, for instance, are financing the Salafis. Because the Muslim Brothers seems to be ideologically connected to Turkey and financially connected to the Qataris. And so there is this debate going on in this. So it's not clear. But what is clear is that it seems that whatever elections are held, Muslim Brother affiliated political formations are coming on top. And most of them are making statements of affinity, of admiration, to Erdogan in person and to the AKP more generally. If you saw what happened when he visited Egypt, the liberals tried to prop him up as saying, to defend secularism. Immediately he realized that was a major mistake. He was pounced upon by much more powerful forces to say, no, look, the debate became, is Turkey really secular or not? But the bottom line is that there is affinity among the new elites, the new dominant elites, and the Turkish elite. And there's enough evidence that there's considerable affinity. If you look at the results in Morocco, who the prime minister is, in Tunisia, in Libya, and in Egypt, I think that's enough that's a trend.
So
one is an okay, two is a coincidence, three is a pattern, and four is definitely a trend. So the question is, yes, there is affinity both among elites and elite population. And that really scares on some people.
But then also, the Zafer and Pantelis, this soft power and hegemony question. If that's the case, which I agree, then Turkey, without being Turkish, because we tend to exaggerate ourselves and stuff like that, but there is a specificity of this moment that Turkey is able to construct some sort of hegemonic position in these regions. And this hegemonic position has, for instance, a very strong economic dimension, because Turkey has been a very big trading state. As a matter of fact, you guys didn't mention, but soap operas are very much attached to it. Turkey's soft power position has been quite successful. Kemal Kirişçi makes that kind of point as far as its trading state position goes. So that its trade with all these regions are very increased. But at the same time, of course, trade and economy would not be enough, would be necessary but not sufficient condition with hegemony. Maybe Turkey, different from Brazil, Mexico, the previous countries like Turkey is right now is able to articulate its economic influence with some sort of cognitive, conceptual influence that is actually conservative modernity and or neo-Ottomanism. And so in this sense, I think I will see actually an increasing connection between, as you said, Zafer, I thought you were going to go there. Like, for instance, the increasing importance of Istanbul as a sort of a symbolic power of Turkey, which means actually there's a big shift from Ankara to Istanbul as defining Turkey. What defines Turkey in Republican modernity was Ankara, now is in Istanbul. And so it was a big selling of Istanbul. And also this new AK Party, new elite. So in this sense, don't you think there's a point about soft power, there's a point about, or at least the specificity that we have to pay attention to this, the ability of Turkey right now to articulate economy, ideology, and politics.
I mean, I don't see any problem with this. Personally, I can't see any problem with such a perspective. What is problematic is that jumping to early conclusions, which is very, very common in Turkish media, among the political circles, especially the ruling party circles, ministers, etc., in their statements, and unfortunately in the academic circles as well. I mean, I read a lot of stuff, euphoristic stuff, saying as if we invaded Middle East already, and we are ruling it as the Turks, as if we re-established the Ottoman Empire. It was so enthusiastic and the only evidence is that Nur is very popular. So what? That is the problem. That's the problem with the kind of soft power, I think, discourse. If we had a proper analysis of power, economic, political, and cultural, combining together, as in the theory of hegemony, then we would not be so euphoristic. We can see the alternatives, perspectives, opportunities, etc., and talk about those rather than talking about like in the movie of conquest, Okay.
Any more questions or comments from the audience?
May I make a quick follow-up comment?
Absolutely.
I think one of the major differences when you mentioned Brazil and Mexico is that Brazil is much bigger than its former colonial power, much more powerful than Portugal. Mexico it's not in the same league in terms of comparison with Spain, but it's a completely different story with Turkey in the Middle East. There is no, I mean, there's a Turkish project for the Middle East, there's an Iranian project, there's an American project in which Israel plays a big role. There is no Arab project. Brazil is probably going to be, within our lifetime, on the Security Council of a rearranged UN. So the power of the post-colonial state in Latin America, especially with the examples of Brazil and Mexico, is very different from the situation here, where Turkey does not have an Arab rival among the countries formerly.
I kind of disagree with Zafer in that sense, that when you look at the debates and performances of these countries, Brazil, Turkey, even India, in that sense, you see that Turkey has the advantage of linking economy and discourse or politics together, whereas, for instance, all the trends show that Brazilian economy and Indian economy are far better and will be far better than Turkish economy. So Turkey will rank around 12, 13 in the world economy during the 2020s and 30s. But nevertheless, among this BRIC, China, India, Brazil, Russia, then plus and 11, Turkey is one of them, now BRIC plus Turkey. But Turkey is only country other than China and Russia whose success fits both global trends and Turkey's domestic transformations, and also Turkey's engagements with the Middle East. So I agree with Zafer that there is a big exaggeration, all those things, and it is not very healthy. But nevertheless, that criticism, maybe I'm unfair to you anyway, but that criticism should not lead one, as many of our friends in Turkey do, that Turkey cannot do anything or Turkey cannot be influential. As a matter of fact, Turkey maybe is the only country whose power fits both global and regional and domestic trends. Brazil is not going to produce the concept that will be effective in the 2010 centuries. Economy, yes, but politically and foreign policy speaking, and Iranian case, yes, I agree.
Further comments or questions? I will take a minute then to make a comment, to ask a question. I think it's also important to historicize all that we're talking about, and I was very happy to see the focus on economy in your papers, Zafer and Pantelis? Because oftentimes we see culture where there is economy. The fact that Turkey is a big exporter of TV programs also has to do with economies of scale. The fact that Turkey is a big TV production industry and is able to produce programs, which it was able to produce programs 10 years ago as well, but now we're producing high quality programs that has export value. That's also another thing. It is sort of perfect that skill made it exportable rather than all the geopolitical issues and moments that Turkey is grasping. That's also important. And if you think in terms of the film industry, in the 1960s, Turkey was the third biggest film producer in the world. And at that time, they were also exporting films to the Middle East and to the region. And of course, that is to be looked upon in relation to the geopolitics of that time. But beyond that, for instance, if Greece, and you talked about Greece, the fact of the economic meltdown and the fact that they were not able to produce programs that therefore they were importing. To be devil's advocate, then, if Greece had that kind of big TV production industry, a big economy of scale, and we can relate to Greece as much as Greece can relate to Turkey in terms of cultural proximity, would it then be a big cultural exporter? Or what can we say about, beyond what we talked about so far in terms of the uniqueness and specificity of the Turkish case in relation to issues beyond media and media exportation?
I think there are some differences in terms of the context, firstly. Of course, all of us, we can see how Turkey has an important role in the Middle East. And of course, the proximities in the Middle East and in Greece are different. Some of the issues that are, and the point that you made about the high quality of programs is something that is highly appreciated in the Greek context. So maybe in the future, when the country, if recovers from the crisis, probably they will try to improve also the quality of their production, because then we're coming back to this proximity which is more closer to the domestic production. So I think one of the important factors here is that Greece, of course, is a small nation, as you said before, so I cannot foresee any possibility. For example, now, one of the companies that are responsible for the distribution of the Turkish soap operas has bought a good production, a Greek one, The Island, which is based on a novel as well, and some other Greek series in order to sell them in the Middle East. So in any case, it seems that someone else who is bigger than Greece has to manage, let's say, this kind of thing.
It's 4 o'clock. I think we can end here and take a coffee break on the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.